Now, when it comes to dealing with your career, you want to avoid career mistakes because typically, if you make one career mistake, it could impact you over a series of years, right? You might have to stick around at a job you don't want to be at for too long because you don't want to have a very short stint on your CV in terms of only working somewhere for a few months. You might stick around for a few years just to make sure you don't jump too quick and it looks bad on your CV. You might have other instances where you're stuck in a job and you're dealing with difficult people and you're not sure what to do, or you don't know how to increase your salary over time. And this is the thing, right? I'm going to help you avoid some common career mistakes throughout this video. So first thing I want you to focus on is avoid picking the wrong job. You need to focus on long-term job satisfaction. And I know that's easier said than done because a lot of the times we just want the higher salary, but sometimes if you're in a job where you're miserable, you're not going to be able to sustain a long time period there or even step up to the next level. So really think about your long-term job satisfaction rather than just securing a job for the sake of it. And you should avoid some common mistakes, right? Sometimes, and I understand when people are dealing with a layoff or something, they don't have a job, they're looking for any job they can get. Simply just getting another job isn't always the answer, right? And you shouldn't just be focused on, oh, how can I get any job? How can I just make a good impression to get that particular job? Only to find out the job is unfulfilling or underpaid, right? You need to move out the desperation mindset, which I'll cover in a few different videos moving forward. But generally speaking now is just kind of understand if you build a strong skill set and a strong resume and present yourself in the best way, you can leverage that to your maximum advantage. Even though you might not get the dream job immediately, it's best to kind of think carefully and think strategically rather than just jumping at the first opportunity you get. Because there's a famous statistic that comes up from Gallup, which is like a professional company that reviews employees and through various surveys, their strengths and weaknesses. And a popular survey that came up a few years ago is where they said only 13% of the workforce is engaged, right? So the vast majority of employees, let's just say around 90% of employees are just not engaged in their work. And the thing is because they're not making smart decisions when it comes to what they want to do. And if you want that long-term fulfillment, you need to avoid these type of scenarios where you get trapped in a bad situation. You want to avoid a low paying job offer by negotiating your salary correctly, which we'll cover in this video. Avoid being underpaid over the longer term. You need to leverage your bargaining power, your experience to negotiate to higher salaries, and also avoid being unhappy at work. You need to know your values. And if a company is really pushing against your personal values and they're doing things you're really uncomfortable with, then you might need to think about moving to the next job so you can have a bit more of internal fulfillment, putting the salary to one side. Now let's talk about this. And before we go into detail in terms of avoiding a low paying job offer and how to, deal with these different scenarios about being underpaid over the longer term and being unhappy at work, I cover a lot of these topics in more detail through my coaching program, right? Link in description if you want to speak with me directly. I help you map your strategy to financial freedom, outsmarting office politics like this, salary negotiations, job hunting, promotions, dealing with layoffs, how to deal with the office politics in terms of being a man in the workplace where they can be quite demeaning against you. So I cover all of that in my coaching program, link in description if you want to speak with me. But let's get back to this. So how to avoid a lower paying job offer. You should know your worth and you should research the market and advocate for fair pay, right? When it comes to a lot of these type of instances, you need to negotiate strategically, which we're going to come through in a bit of detail here. Firstly, you want to look at balancing fairness and compensation, right? So for fair pay, you should cover all your work needs, right? If the employer wants the employees to focus solely on their job rather than taking side jobs, they should compensate you accordingly, right? And if you're in a situation where you're getting a job and it's not paying well, you should think whether you need a side hustle to get the income that you're really looking for, or if the company's flexible to that. Sometimes companies, they don't want to pay you well, but they want to monopolize all your time. And could you set clear boundaries there where, okay, they might not be paying you exactly what you want, but that means you should work those exact work hours that they give you. You shouldn't be putting in extra time in the evening to hope you're going to get a promotion when that might be highly unlikely. You should allocate your time to maximizing your income rather than just helping the company do well and think they're going to pay you down the line, maybe next year with a bonus when that might not be coming. So you have to think about the fair pay to cover all your needs, right? And then also when you're negotiating salaries, you should always think about how much commitment they're giving to you in terms of benefits, right? And what I mean by that is if you're negotiating salaries and they might be reluctant to pay you the salary you're looking for, you should talk about the mutual benefit that you can offer them, right? Of course, you'd be getting paid more, but in return, you'd be more productive, you'd be delivering high quality work, you can leverage and mention a lot of the skills you have at other companies and how you'll be able to bring that experience to this particular new opportunity that you're looking for and the job that you're interviewing for. You can talk about all your experience and how that adds value to the company rather than perhaps going for a less experienced candidate. So this is the thing, right? You got to think about how you can leverage that to benefit you. And if you're not getting the salary you're looking for, thinking about if you can focus on more flexibility or remote work options that they might be offering you if they're not going to give you the salary you're looking for. Here it says as a news article headline, many people are unhappy with the core elements of their career in the UK. They're fed up with the current jobs. They're trying to look for higher salaries and better job security. So it just shows you, you're not the only one who might be dealing with these scenarios where they do put you in quite a difficult situation. Next up, we have strategies for effective negotiation. When it comes to negotiating for your salaries, you need to focus on dynamics where how you can negotiate a better salary effectively, right? You can do research in terms of what's being earned across the industry, whether you can see it recruiters. Sometimes recruiters, they release surveys and those surveys will show, okay, at these different job titles, this is the rough salary that are being made. Glassdoor, there are other website options where you can find what is the rough salary for your particular location, your particular industry and your job title, right? So I know many recruitment firms within London, for example, they have these finance surveys where they talk about the finance industry and the various salary levels, say for analyst, associate, managing director, and you can see if you're broadly under that range or you're very below that range, you should be able to have a chat with the recruiter, have a chat with the company you might be working at in the right way, of course, which I cover through personalized one-to-one coaching, how to negotiate that to give you a bit of leverage to increase your salary, right? And that's how you can do a bit of research to see if you are benchmarking your income with the rest of people with your level of experience, right? You should be able to explain why you're valuable to the company, what projects you've been working on, what future value you can add, maybe skills and professional qualifications you're doing on the side that will help you contribute to that particular job, with strong reasons to ask for better pay and benefits, right? And I think a good example here is around people who are putting their lives on the line, as you can see from the headline, working to help with those California fires, and they're trying to work hard to combat these type of issues, but they're not getting paid too well for saving lives. And these are the type of difficult situations that a lot of people have to deal with. Now we're going to move on to overcoming self-doubt in negotiation, right? You need to understand some people get quite insecure when it comes to negotiating. They don't know their own self-worth. And that's why something I encourage throughout my videos is that you have to have positive self-talk in your mind. Your inner monologue has to be positive. Nowadays, many times if you're in this society, particularly if you're a man, you have a lot of negative feedback from society, a lot of people giving you terrible advice, baby boomers, your parents' generation, trying to give you terrible life advice, maybe encouraging you to, get stuck in a dead-end career just because it's the safe, stable option when it's clearly not what you should be pursuing. You could be people who are just talking down to you at work, who make you feel like you're not good at the job, gaslighting, things like that. So you need to be able to overcome the self-doubt in negotiations, right? If you're doubting yourself a lot, you might be considering, how you could stay confident, not giving up important benefits too easily, right? Maintaining your position and not constantly backing down when you're in negotiations around salary, for example. And if you know your worth, you present yourself well, you're confident in what you have to offer, then you won't kind of feel insecure when it comes to these negotiations, right? Because lots of people have self-doubt due to weak negotiation strategies. They think the company they're working for holds all the power, they undervalue themselves, and it's important to research the market, like I covered before, to know what you're worth, and avoid unnecessary concessions, because you shouldn't give up work from home or fair work-life balance compensations if you have that leverage, right? So for example, if you want to work from home 2 days a week, maybe to look after kids or because you want to pick up your kids from school, something like that. If you have a lot of experience that's kind of unique in your industry to offer, you shouldn't just always back down like, oh, well, everyone's got dragged back to the office, I have to go back to the office. If you can have some leverage to benefit you, that's good. And going back to your internal dialogue, right? If you have negative self-talk, this will erode your confidence. If you want to sell your skills, you have to be internally confident, right? If you're not, you can work on that, whether it's working out in the gym, positive affirmations, loads of things can help you with this. You shouldn't let past criticisms lower your expectations of what you're allowed to achieve. You know, dealt with people who have a crabs in a bucket mentality, where people are quite negative and they try to talk you down too. And I recommend you distance yourself from those people, even if they're family members, right? Because they just tend to drag you down, right? If people are always talking negative about you, whether it's a co-worker, family member, trying to make sure your dreams and aspirations are a lot lower than you think they should be, just minimize your interaction with those type of people. They're very negative and they've got nothing really valuable to add to your life. So think about those negotiation strategies quite clearly, and avoid letting, like I said, those past criticisms impact you. And also, I would also encourage you to kind of consider how much work you're taking on when it comes to in relation to the salary. Think about this. If you're taking on a lot of extra work and not getting paid a lot of extra money, you should think carefully about that, right? And lots of people, they just want to take on more work. They want to be seen as a respected employee and think that management are going to give them a high salary raise later. Sometimes that doesn't occur, right? So you've got to be careful about what responsibilities you're taking on, and if those responsibilities you're taking on are linked to a salary increase, right? So you feel constantly having to step in to help another employee who's not good at their job on the team. Is your job title going to change to covering, for example, foreign exchange trading and commodities trading? And if your job title's not going to change as doing both of those areas, but you are doing both of those areas, you should ask about that to your manager. Like, well, I'm covering two business lines. I'm only getting paid for one. Will my salary reflect the increase of my responsibilities by next year? And if not, then you should consider whether you want to continue accepting a fair deal. Some people just skip the salary discussion and the career growth conversation because they don't want to have an uncomfortable moment. And that's why confidence is crucial at what value you have to add. And this is kind of a funny little news article on the screen, right? Rise of Ick, which is just women feeling uncomfortable around men, or dropping out of a date or a social interaction just for one little minor thing that made her feel uncomfortable. But it's kind of funny because it says the rise of the ick is damaging men's mental health. Experts claim the expression is used to describe a feeling of disgust or repulsion, a specific behavior, but therapists say it's no joke. Now, I think it's a bit of a ridiculous meme thing, but I think just digging a bit deeper in that, it really shows you how there's just never-ending negative feedback for a lot of men in this society and how it does impact them. It's kind of interesting. And in terms of, negotiating your salary and not being a dumbass, to put it nicely, right? We've got this instance where we had this radio station in Chicago where Arrowgrass, who's a radio host, and what this radio host did is they didn't effectively negotiate their salary. And what ended up happening there is this. In 2013, the radio host Arrowgrass was offered a raise, right? And you should take a raise if you're offered it, of course, unless they're dumping you with tons of extra work. So he's offered a raise from $170,000 to $278,000. He declined because of his feelings, right? His feelings told him that taking a higher salary when this is a public radio station and it relied on donations, he didn't want to do that. So rather than take a pay rise from 170 to 278, he took a pay cut to $146,000, which is completely dumb, right? I understand you might not agree with the radio station's publicly funded, you don't want to take advantage of people's donations, but if the company decides to give you a pay rise, obviously you should take it. Bear in mind what responsibilities might be associated with that, right? But it just shows you should never undervalue yourself, particularly if you have a personal brand, you're a public figure, you're a well-respected person in the office, you're popular in the office. You should always take the increase in pay rise, of course. Bear in mind the circumstances, but it just shows you how you should always leverage whatever worth you can get from how you're perceived, right? In this case, this person's perceived quite favorably as a valuable asset to the radio station, regardless of whether his actual radio station skills are good or not. Is he particularly good in his discussion points? He might be very boring, but if the company values you more, just a perception, and this is what it comes down to, a lot of things based on perception rather than reality. You should always take the pay rise or be able to negotiate that by improving the perception of yourself. If you doubt your value, it can lead to loss of income. That's why you need to research salaries, build your confidence, and negotiate for fair pay, right? Lots of people undervalue themselves and they have lots of internal doubts and discomfort, and then they reject or they don't pursue that higher salary. Now, moving on, I want you to avoid being underpaid over the longer term by leveraging your bargaining power, right? If you want to be strategic when it comes to negotiations, of course, understand what the company expects of you, only focus on the key priorities, the top 2 or 3 projects for your manager, build relationships through open discussions with others, and avoid aggressive tactics, which is the last thing we'll come on to here, is around saying things that could aggravate people, that could risk you losing a job offer or negotiating a higher salary. So we start with 2A, right? So strategic approach to negotiations. You should learn what the company's values are and ask questions to find common ground, focusing on a few key priorities instead of overwhelming the employer. So what I mean by that is find out what the company expects by talking to people in your network, in the company, or checking online about what the company's key projects are or what your team's specifically working on. And then ask questions rather than making demands. Like, okay, so we're clearly working on this project, we're aiming to head in this direction, and see what they're open to in terms of finding a solution that will work for both of you. And if you focus on the main 2 or 3 priorities for that year for your employer, maybe during that quarter or whatever, and demonstrate how you added value and what you did during the negotiations, so you don't overwhelm the employer and you can save and work on the smaller projects, the smaller work tasks later. If you have big impact on the key projects, the key profit drivers, the key high profile, high visibility items, it puts you in a stronger position to negotiate that salary. Like, I did work on these 3 major projects, this is what I've done, and that's the value I've added, rather than doing 100 small things. Here it says, there's a headline of someone who's said, my job offer was rescinded after I asked for more money. So you've got to be careful on how you deal with it. It's always a very sensitive thing, asking for a pay rise in some of these scenarios. Now, 2B is focused on building stronger negotiation relationships. It's important to build long-term relationships by addressing the needs of you and, of course, the company and the value you add, right? Personal connections and transparent discussions can get you results a lot faster and demonstrate how you're valuable to the broader team and department and important stakeholders. So I know I've got an image of Mean Girls, right? And it's kind of funny that some of the discussions online around, and articles and headlines and things like that around being popular in the office, they're not posting screenshots of Wall Street movies. They actually post screenshots of Mean Girls. It's like something that comes up again and again, which is like a high school drama about being popular at high school, right, amongst women. But it just shows you how ridiculous the office is now, right? Like I say, if you're popular in the office, it'll give you a lot of leverage to negotiate that higher salary because you're perceived as being high value. Moving on to 2C, which is lesson from negotiation mistakes. Now, some people make mistakes by being too aggressive, and employers can react badly, revoke job offers. Even in certain situations, if you're dealing with a layoff and you're trying to negotiate a larger layoff package, maybe through some work you've added to the company or extra work you could do before you leave, if you're too aggressive, they can react quite badly, right? Because obviously when you're in an employer-employee scenario, they have way more leverage than you do, right? You should focus on the company's priorities, negotiate via email so there's a record, and in some cases, of course, you'll have meetings about salary negotiations, but anything you can get in writing that suggests, oh, if you do XYZ projects or have hit these certain targets, we'll give you a certain pay rise or reconsider your salary at least. Those are the type of things you're looking for to get into writing at least. So you get something concrete rather than the typical fluff and meaningless small talk that, yeah, they'll definitely reconsider your salary next year. It's best to get it in writing if you can. And if there's any signs that seem like you're not a good fit for the job, you should make sure you can explain them or address them. And it's very strategic the way you do that. And again, I cover that in more detail through my coaching program. But what it could include, for example, is that, if you have one particular weak area, maybe they've highlighted that you have weaker communication skills, you can kind of cover that up with saying, well, I've been doing this communications course outside of work called Toastmasters. Sure, some of you heard about that, which is about developing communication and improvisation speaking skills. Or you could just simply mention that we have other strengths that help deal with address that type of issue, or things like that. Just it depends on the personal circumstances. That's why I'm not going into like specific examples too much, but considering how you can, leverage your strengths and build on your weaknesses, right? In a smart, strategic way, so you don't magnify any weak areas that you have. Now, point number 3, and it's the final point we're going to be going through, is avoid being unhappy at work by knowing your values, right? You want to make career decisions that are based on your personal true priorities, not peer validation, prestige, how other people perceive you, by having a structured scoring system to evaluate key factors between job offers. So maybe you have multiple job offers, or you're unhappy at your job and you're considering alternatives. It's good to do some detailed analysis for yourself. You probably spend a lot of time at work doing detailed analysis to make your company a lot of money, but you have to do this type of analysis for yourself, right? And one of the big skills you learn at any office job is some level of analysis. So a simple thing like setting up an Excel file for yourself, of course, on your personal laptop, not on your work laptop, where you compare maybe this job to another job you might be moving on to, or multiple job offers you might have. And they could be comparing not just a salary, which of course everyone would focus on, but okay, where's the location? Can I work from home? Do I have to be in the office 3 days a week? What's the work-life balance like? Is it a bunch of new stressful work? How does it work in terms of the management dynamics? Does this manager, is he very friendly with me? Can I get on quite well with him? And in some cases, I'd advise you, if you've got another job you could be pursuing, like another job external to the company you could be pursuing, but you're at a company where the manager's quite friendly, you get on well with them, it's very clear that team members like you, you're relatively popular, your pay's okay, but it's not great for your particular position. It might be worthwhile sticking with that rather than jumping into the unknown where you might get a 20% pay rise, but then you never know how difficult that manager could be. You could be there thinking, oh, I'm going to be making 20% more. It's going to work out fine, but then you deal with difficult personalities and then you're pushed out the company after 2 years, right? You never know. Sometimes the devil you know is better than the devil you don't, right? You've probably heard that phrase. Or the circumstances you know are better than the circumstances you don't. And in that case, if you're stable in a position where you think they're very unlikely to lay you off, you might want to consider increasing your income by doing things outside of work, right? And again, something I cover through my coaching program would be things like, do you want to do some freelance work? Do you want to do some other, build a second skill and make some money on the side doing that? So those are all the type of things that are worthwhile considering, right? Rather than just a salary. So if we focus on 3A here, avoid external influence in decision making. Friends and co-workers and, fake friends at work, right? Friendly co-workers, they can give you deliberately bad advice, including family members sometimes give bad advice when it comes to job offers. And you need to think independently of what you want first, right? Only seek out new info or new context if it's going to enable you to still think independently about your decision, right? Your overall decision-making process should involve you thinking for yourself. Now, what I mean by that is sometimes you might have another job offer to look at another scenario and it's a pay rise, it's more risky in a different location, and you might have family members who are more focused on their personal security and stability and that their lack of progress, maybe they just work government jobs and they didn't really progress much in their particular field. And they'll always want you to play it safe because they played it safe and they didn't go anywhere or even take one step up for several decades in their career. Typical, the baby boomer generation did stuff like that. So if you want to go from maybe working in London to working in New York and they're like always trying to talk you out of it, no, it's a terrible decision. They just maybe don't want you to work abroad because it makes them feel more comfortable if you're in the same location as them. Or they might just always say, oh, it's too high risk, you don't know what you're doing there. You should be careful about what information you're taking in and how that's impacting your decision-making process. You need to think independently, and that's why I mentioned, having things like an Excel file for and against for each job offer you might be dealing with or each work situation. That'll help you move forward in a more effective way. And as you can see in this article here, is your friend sabotaging you? Watch out for these red flags. Getting Mean Girl vibes. Run, right? And again, Mean Girls comes up time and time again. I haven't even watched the movie, but this high school movie about girls trying to be popular or things like that is really reflects so much about the popularity contest that this society's in, right? So some people might be like, they want you to pursue a job that has a fancy job title, maybe executive director at Citigroup, for example, Citibank. Then what ends up happening is that you might get coerced or brainwashed into thinking that's the right decision when it might be a terrible life decision for you. It might include much longer work hours, even for extra pay, and then you can't spend time maybe raising your kids or focus on your out of work priorities, right? So you should consider, what is the social status game getting played? Sometimes, like I've covered in my recent videos, it's the best decision for a man not to pursue a promotion, and maybe he can do things on the side or pursue minimalism, whatever works for him. So you have to think independently of others and their potential underhanded agendas. Now, the last 2 points here are 3B and 3C. So 3B, we're covering prestige and profit, right? So when you compare prestige versus profit and a practical skills, so many people think prestige is the good approach to focus on. Like I say, job titles, but at the end of the day, the only thing that matters, only two things that are real in the finance industry or any corporate job you're pursuing, any job really, is the money and the time. You want financial freedom and you want time freedom, right? Maybe you're moving from Google to working at Netflix or whatever that would be. Maybe moving from Deutsche Bank to JP Morgan, things like that. So that's the leverage of what you have in terms of the money, right? You can leverage the name of a company. And also you want to focus on time, whether that's remote work, hybrid work options, or maybe they have a level of flexibility, even if you're in the office 5 days a week, where you might be able to leave early on a few days to spend more time with your family or work from home in a quieter location. So these are all the things you need to think about, right? So don't let prestige overshadow the profit, right? So you might be making more money at a smaller company that doesn't have a brand name and the prestige of working at JP Morgan, but it might be a better fit for you, right? And then practical skills. So will the brand name of the company lead to a future high paying job like I just covered? And what about skills? Are you building highly valuable skills or just pointless Excel data entry type of work, right? So compare prestige on one side versus profit and practical skills. So those are the 3 P's to consider. I think obviously profit and practical skills are that we need to focus on for your long-term career success. As you can see from this headline, I grew my salary from 40,000 to 225,000 in 6 years by job hopping. And they cover their strategy in that particular article. I might cover it in a future video, but I'm sure that's a bit of an exaggerated example. I'm sure there's a bit more to it than that. But the point is, job hopping can work, right? And when you focus on what's going to make you the most money rather than maybe staying with a big company that is going to give you a fancy job title, might be the best fit for you. I know people who have done that a few times, right? They've worked at Goldman Sachs, then they worked at a hedge fund that's focusing on algorithmic trading, and then another small hedge fund, then they went back to Goldman Sachs for a massive pay rise. So these are the type of things you got to think about, right? Some people would not make the move. If some people are working at Goldman Sachs, for example, they're never going to make the move unless they get a layoff. So they won't have those experiences of betting on themselves to work for a small hedge fund that no one's ever heard of, that ended up becoming quite well known and renowned, and another small hedge fund like asset management firm, then going back to Goldman Sachs. Some people would just think, oh no, I've taken a massive step down if I left Goldman Sachs, for example. Point number 3C, right? Ranking the options. Like I say, if you have an Excel file and you compare all the options, not just the salary aspects, benefits, commute, other key factors, personality types, what is the gender balance on the team? If you're a man and you're going to an all-woman team, you know, that can pose its issues. If they have personalities that might not gel with you, you might be better working for a male manager than a female manager. It depends, you know, you got to think about, I mean, other things that make people feel a bit uncomfortable. You might be more comfortable with your own particular racial background, religious background. There could be biases that favor you at one company versus the other. So you got to think carefully about what are the real social dynamics there. As I often say, the most important relationship at work is the relationship with your manager, and maybe the most important relationship in your life is your relationship with your manager. If you get on with them well, your job's more secure compared to somewhere where you might be getting higher pay and the manager might not like you that much. They might see you as a low priority to them, and then that if you lose that job, of course it impacts every aspect of your life, your ability to earn an income. So you got to compare those options, all those softer, smaller dynamics, right? And if you are interested in these type of analysis, if you want to really plan out your life in a strategic, effective way, as things continue to become less and less stable, I have a link in description where I'll give you a lot of company man success secrets throughout my experience working in the finance industry for over a decade, sales and trading investment banking roles at Goldman, Morgan Stanley, HSBC, and many other institutions. And I'll help you outsmart office politics, survive and thrive in the workplace as a man, and prepare for promotions and a lucky layoff, right? And this will help you really accelerate your success for financial freedom and time freedom. So if you're interested, link in description. Let me know in the comments how you feel about some of these instances. I think it's kind of important for your long-term happiness and financial freedom to ensure, you know, you don't get stuck in a low-paying job. You don't end up being underpaid over the long term, which I have seen too, and then being generally unhappy at work because you're very uncomfortable with the social dynamics there, right? These are all types of things to really consider over the long term. Now, 2 recommended videos on the screen right now, and I'll see you next time.